It's been quite a while since I've made a video that I've had to edit, and it's been quite a while since I've made a video about a film. And as I always say when I make a video about a film, I'm not really a film critic. I would much prefer to leave that to somebody else. That being said, I was galvanised into doing both of these things just the other week by watching a film named The Old Oak. Now, The Old Oak is what could be described as a local film. It was made by the BBC and it was set in County Durham, which is in the northeast of England, about 2 counties away from the border to Scotland. And I know this because I live in the county that is on the border of Scotland and have visited many of the places in the film. Now, I went to see the film because a friend of mine wanted to go and see it for her birthday, and since her husband was unavailable, I decided to chaperone her and buy one all you can eat Chinese afterwards, but more of that later. So needless to say, I wasn't enthused by the plot of the film. It was about Syrian refugees settling into a town in England. I was unaware that it was a town in County Durham, but it wouldn't have made much difference, other than to say that I was sitting at the beginning of the film and thought, you know what, that's a local accent. So it probably doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out that this film is about racism. A member of the charity that helps Syrian refugees resettle into England is a bloke called T.J. Ballinger, who runs a pub called, unsurprisingly, The Old Oak. Now, his village, which is very carefully unnamed in this film, has been going through some hard times since the coal mine shut, which is interesting because, to my estimation, that was at least 30 years ago, but they haven't managed to pick themselves up since. Now, to compound this scene of despair, all of a sudden a bunch of Syrian refugees are rehoused in this village, and the locals are treated to seeing them get a lot of free stuff, which they resent because they have long been living on austerity and hard times, and now they're seeing these people who have just turned up getting free bikes and free food. This, of course, breeds some resentment. As a quick edit, I should point out that this is resentment in the film, not with myself, because I know they had a bomb dropped in the house and they've got nothing. But moving on. TJ, the landlord of the pub and also a member of this charity, is somewhat reticent to get involved in the racism which he often sees in his own pub. However, he still wants to help these refugees. And the plot goes from there. He refuses to let his locals use a room in his pub. He does let the refugees use the room in his pub. Quick edit here. Although it is the charity and one of the Syrians that encourages him to open his back room, it is for a community dinner that involves both locals and Syrian refugees. He wasn't exclusive. And it sort of goes from there. There's a lot of racist English people and there's a lot of poor Syrian people. And I might sound a little bitter about that, I hope I don't. But I think I need to get some things straight before we go on. Just to get my stance on Syrian refugees as early in this video as clear as possible, I completely support Britain taking in Syrian refugees. I do believe that we have an international obligation to help people in theatres of war. And I am also under no illusions of racism that is directed towards them from many quarters. This is not my problem with the film. But I feel we should talk about the film as a film first. Firstly, the acting is amateurish. I believe this is because they got a lot of amateurs in. Now, this does help with a genuine local accent, and I must admit they got the level of swearing in the area down to a T. I was quite amused by that. That being said, it doesn't help with the actual acting. Fortunately, the film didn't really need anybody to act too much, so that was okay. Some of the scenes were quite clunky. For instance, the scene in the bar when people came in, stood in the middle of the bar room and shouted their business over the bar rather than just walking up to the bar and having it in a normal tone of voice. This was purely for the benefit of the racist locals sitting there so they could see what was going on. Also, there was one instance where a young Syrian lad was the victim of a racist attack by some lads at his school, and they recorded the attack, they recorded the reactions to the attack by the racist people, and then it just vanished from existence. They insinuated that he'd done something to anger these lads, but it was never fully investigated, so I was a little annoyed about that. Now, the sins of the actual cinematography aside, I didn't like It's difficult for me to say because I don't want to say I didn't like the message of the film, because obviously any message that opposes racism should be quite welcome, and I do oppose racism. Perhaps my problem with the film is all the racism and all the problems seem to... New drinking game. Every time you see TJ take a carpet out of a van, take a drink. There wasn't much footage for this film on the internet. You see be on one side of the fence, which is to say it all lay with the locals. The locals were bullies. The locals were racists. I hasten to say that not all of the locals were complete bastards. Obviously TJ wasn't, but he was shown as being perhaps an enabler to it because he didn't challenge people who spoke in his pub. Can I just say also that the scene where TJ was being openly insulted by one of his patrons in his bar room, I have never met a landlord that would have put up with that in my life. Now, facts are facts that all of the problems that are presented in this film are real problems. There are people like that. I wouldn't have to walk the length of the street I live in to find people in England who think and act towards Syrian refugees and indeed members of many ethnic minorities like that. I would have to walk a little bit further to find somebody who would willingly sabotage their friend's pub, especially a friend who had presided at their wedding. My problem with the film was, while concentrating on the minority of people in the UK who are racist and prejudiced towards refugees and bitter, we never concentrated on any of the negative qualities of the minority of Syrian refugees. And there are a minority of Syrian refugees who have made some trouble in the country that they were moved to when the war started in Syria. This might be an unpalatable truth, but it is unfortunately a truth. And I don't believe that you should make a film addressing a truthful problem and not include all parts of the problem. Of course, in many more fantastic films, the minority gangs have got the short end of the stick. Just look at John Wick, for instance. That was Eastern European gangs and Russian gangs. But John Wick was not a film that was trying to address the problems of Russian gangs in America and Northern Europe. He just needed somebody to shoot. The Old Oak, however, is a film that was trying to address the problem of racism towards Syrians in the UK. And I truly hope this is a problem that can be resolved at some point. But if you are going to resolve a problem, you must look at all of the factors that cause the problem and not just play the blame game. And I believe this film, to a certain extent, in fact to a great extent, played the blame game.